Someone lied to you today. You probably don't know when. You probably don't know who. And the most unsettling part is this. You may have done the same thing back without even noticing. Lying feels like a choice. It feels like a decision you make in a specific moment, for a specific reason. But the science says something far stranger. Lying isn't something humans learned to do despite their nature. It is something humans learned to do because of it. And the moment it began, the exact point in our evolutionary history when the first deliberate deception passed between two human minds, changed everything that came after. This is that story. Go back far enough and you reach a world without language. Not a quiet world, a loud one, full of signals. Animals communicating through sound, posture, color, movement, but those signals were honest. A bird's bright plumage honestly advertised genetic fitness. A dog's growl honestly advertised aggression. The signal and the truth behind it were the same thing. Evolution had built a world where deception was difficult and costly, and where honest communication was almost always more efficient. Then something happened in the human lineage. Something that didn't happen quite the same way in any other species. We developed language. And language, it turns out, is a lie-enabling technology. Anthropologist Robin Dunbar, whose work on social cognition has shaped how we understand human communication, has argued that language evolved primarily for social bonding, a kind of vocal grooming that let our ancestors maintain relationships with more people than physical grooming alone could manage. But the same tool that let you tell your tribe where the food was also let you tell them something that wasn't true. For the first time in the history of life on Earth, a creature could deliberately misrepresent reality, not just behave deceptively, the way a stick insect blends into bark, but consciously choose to say something false. That gap between what you know and what you say is the birthplace of lying. But why would evolution favor it? The answer is more complicated than you might expect, and it starts with a concept called theory of mind. Theory of mind is your ability to understand that other people have beliefs, desires, and knowledge that are different from your own. It sounds obvious, but it is one of the most cognitively demanding feats any brain has ever been asked to perform. To lie successfully, you need to hold two realities in your mind at once: what you know to be true and what you want the other person to believe. You need to predict how they will interpret your words. You need to model their mind inside your own mind. Developmental psychologist Michael Tomasello, whose decades of research at the Max Planck Institute have fundamentally changed how we understand human cognition, has shown that this capacity appears in children somewhere between the ages of 3 and 5. Before that age, children genuinely cannot lie effectively. Not because they lack the moral capacity, but because they lack the cognitive one. They cannot yet fully model what another person believes. The moment a child passes that threshold and tells their first successful lie, they are demonstrating one of the most sophisticated cognitive feats in the animal kingdom. And what does that first lie usually protect? Themselves. A child takes a cookie and says they didn't. A child breaks something and says it was already broken. A child says they did their homework when they didn't. Every first lie is a lie of self-preservation. And that is not a coincidence. Because the evolutionary pressures that selected for lying in the first place were exactly the same. Your ancestors lived in groups. They depended on those groups for survival, for food, for protection, for mating opportunities. And within those groups, social standing was everything. If your reputation was damaged, if people believed you were lazy, disloyal, cowardly, or incompetent, the consequences were not just social. They were existential. Being excluded from the group in the Pleistocene was a sentence that often ended in death. So the ability to manage your reputation, to control what others believed about you, was a survival advantage. Sometimes that meant honest self-promotion. Sometimes it meant concealing failure. Sometimes it meant attributing your mistake to someone else. The specific form didn't matter. What mattered was the outcome, that the group continued to see you as valuable, trustworthy, and worth keeping around. Researcher Robert Trivers, whose work on self-deception and social evolution has influenced fields from evolutionary biology to psychology, made a counterintuitive argument in the 1970s that has only grown more supported over time. The most convincing liars, he observed, are not the ones who consciously craft their deceptions. They are the ones who believe their own distortions. Self-deception, Trivers argued, evolved because it makes external deception more convincing. If you genuinely believe your own version of events, you show none of the subtle signals, the micro-expressions, the voice shifts, the gaze aversions, that give conscious liars away. Think about what that means. Evolution didn't just select for the ability to deceive others. It may have selected for the ability to deceive yourself first. But here's the part that complicates the story. Lying is not simply a social weapon. It is also, in many cases, a form of social glue. Psychologist Robert Feldman at the University of Massachusetts has spent years studying everyday deception. In one of his most cited studies, he asked pairs of strangers to have a 10-minute conversation, then reviewed the recordings together with the participants. He found that 60% of people lied at least once during the 10-minute interaction. Most of those lies were not malicious. They were social lubricant. I'm doing great. That sounds really interesting. You look fantastic. Lies that preserved the social fabric. Lies that kept the interaction warm and moving forward. Your ancestors needed that too. A group held together by relentless, brutal honesty would have been a group in constant conflict. Some level of social fiction, some shared agreement to smooth over inconvenient truths, may have been adaptive. Not because it was morally good, but because it worked. And so you inherited both capacities. The capacity to deceive for self-protection, and the capacity to deceive for social harmony. Sitting inside you right now, operating below the level of conscious deliberation most of the time, are the cognitive tools of 10,000 generations of social negotiation. That is why lying doesn't feel like lying most of the time. When you tell someone you're fine when you're not, your brain doesn't experience that as deception. It experiences it as social navigation. When you frame a story in a way that makes you look better than the raw facts would suggest, your brain doesn't experience that as dishonesty. It experiences it as explanation. The machinery is so old, so deeply embedded that it operates before moral evaluation can catch up. Neuroscientist Yaling Yang and her colleagues at the University of Southern California used brain imaging to compare the brains of habitual liars with those of non-liars, and found measurable structural differences. Specifically more white matter in the prefrontal cortex, the region associated with complex social and emotional processing. The infrastructure of deception is not an aberration. It is built into the architecture, but this raises the question that your ancestors couldn't afford to ignore and that you probably think about more than you realize. If everyone has the capacity to lie and lying is often undetectable, how does trust work at all? The answer is that trust works because lying has costs, social costs, and your brain evolved to detect them. When someone's words don't match their body language, you feel it. When a story doesn't quite fit together, something in you notices. When someone avoids your gaze at exactly the wrong moment, an alarm fires. These are not learned skills. They are ancient threat detection systems repurposed for social reading. The same amygdala that once scanned the tree line for predators now scans the face across from you for signs of deception. You are not always right. Decades of research on lie detection have shown that humans are only slightly better than chance at identifying when someone is lying to them. But the system is sensitive enough to maintain pressure. Lying has costs because being caught has costs. And that balance between the benefits of successful deception and the risks of detected deception is what kept the whole system honest enough to function. Your ancestors navigated that balance every day. Every interaction in a small tribal group was a calculation. How much can I stretch the truth here? What will they believe? What will they check? How will it look if they find out? These weren't explicit questions. They were processed automatically, beneath awareness, in the space between one sentence and the next. You are still running that calculation in every conversation, in every email, in every text message where you choose which details to include and which to leave out. The medium is different. The stakes have changed, but the cognitive machinery is the same. Someone lied to you today, and somewhere in the long, tangled history of your species, that sentence stopped being a moral observation. It became a description of what it means to be human. The question isn't whether you lie. The question is which lies you've decided to believe.